Alrighty, what is up, traders? Welcome back. First video for my YouTube channel of 2023. So it's pretty exciting, and it's even more exciting because January was a absolutely fantastic, whatever you want to throw out there. It was a great month. It was really, really good. It came down to really two big plays, although I did make decent amount of money elsewhere. But if you watch my YouTube channel enough, I don't know why I'm surprised by it every month that, again, any big months I have usually come down to one or two big plays. It's just the kind of trader I am. As much as I would love to be making massive wins on every trade I take, the reality is most of my trades are average at best, and then it's usually the one in every 100 trades ends up being a big winner. And again, not necessarily because of randomness, but because I do get prepared. I know when to size up big, and we'll talk about those plays that turned that presented themselves and kind of helped me, make $280,000 in 1 month. This is, I believe, my fourth or fifth best month. I think fourth. But anyways, it's great. I'm really happy with my stats. The average loss is pretty dang small. I only had one loss over 10 grand, which is $15,000. We will go over that trade as well. So yeah, let's jump right in. Week one was pretty dull. I don't really remember much. It just trades here and there, setups here and there that were just the first thing I remember, and the trade that stood out to me when I look at all the trades that I took and actually can remember and recall from them was on the 9th. The 9th was actually my first, again, big win of the month was MMV. So what MMV essentially ended up being was a liquidation play, was kind of what we've been seeing a lot of in 2022, of which was kind of those China liquidation plays. And originally, I actually didn't think this was going to happen. I actually had no idea. It really wasn't on my radar until, thankfully, Jack Kellogg brought it to my attention. So I kind of owe him this one. Otherwise, I would never really have played it. He just told me, like, hey, I think this thing's going to die. I actually don't even have access. Let me do a custom day. But he's like, hey, I think this thing's going to die. I'm short. And I look at it, I'm like, I don't really think it is. But then again, it had the initial signs. So I'm like, you know what? I can't ignore what I'm looking at. I know what this might do if it does work. Again, it was a SPAC that started at $10 if you saw on the daily chart earlier. And some SPACs have actually recently been doing this kind of liquidation play, right? The NASDAQ had stopped some of these China plays from IPOing. And so the only natural transition is to possibly do some SPACs, right? That's at least my thinking. And so that's kind of why I ended up taking this trade. If you see here, I do notice this huge volume coming in. I didn't even notice it really until it actually started halting down here. But these were the big volume that came in was one of the signs that I had kind of seen it, and I was like, oh, okay, if it happens here, like the early signs are there, and I should probably trust and take the trade. So that is what I ended up doing. If we go to my trades here, I ended up getting short, like I said, right before that first halt down, add a little bit out of that halt. And then, again, like you've seen some other plays that I've tried in 2022, the rest is kind of history. Now, some might have really big squeezes, and I was, when this thing bounced, I actually was prepared for this to squeeze and to cut it over, this, call it 13 level, this last 13 high where this big volume came in. But again, it was just a bounce. We just kept going. I covered a little bit here just to downsize. And the next thing you know, I'm covering down into the 4s and 5s, being short from the 10s, and ended up locking $30,000, right? And the volume's great. I mean, we haven't seen really a liquidation play as good as this since this, at least one that I've seen. I know there was one other in the month that I unfortunately forget the name of, the ticker of, that I completely missed. And I don't even think it was this kind of like a China scam. It was more of like an offering. Someone probably knows the ticker. If you want to know the ticker, comment it, but I can't remember at the time. But this is the one I nailed, MMV, right? Made $30,000 in that. Again, still has never come back. If you look at the daily chart, it's just been dead since that day. Again, good volume. And so I owe, shout out to Jack Kellogg, right? He's been killing it this month. He is out by ton in January and now in February. So he's on fire. So again, it helps to be in contact with traders that you're close to. And again, he wasn't even talking about it to me privately. Like, he mentioned it in the Clover trading chat room that we're both in. So it's like, I saw it. I'm like, yep, you know what? I think I should take this. So anyways, the next one, and on the same day of the 19th, so I made 30, right? But you only seen 19 grand on that day. So what else happened? I ended up losing 10 grand on VENG. Now, VENG actually ends up being one of my big winners, but before we get to that, it actually was a loser, right? It was actually about 3 or 4 trades across different brokers that led to me losing about 10 grand or so. And what happened was, you can see this is clearly, if you recognize it, it is a kind of a promotion. It's a scam, a OTC kind of pump and dump. And they did a really great job with this, right? They started at $2 to $3, took it all the way to nearly 20, dumped it, did it again, and now they were on this third wave, right? And I had I had pretty much been short all throughout here. Didn't really expect them to do this, although I was prepared for it, right? If you know how I trade these, again, I'll link the very first video where I talk about these pump and dump kind of scams or promotions. Very first YouTube video. So I'll link that down in the description below. So I'm not going to go too into detail. I feel like I really explained that well in the first video. It's ironically the very first YouTube video I've ever made. Freaking probably 4 years ago now. Time flies by. But, essentially I was prepared for them to take it higher, but just in case they didn't, I had small size on in like the 16s and 15s. Now, once they did do it and they kind of took it red for the first time, not for the first time, but started dumping on this day, this is when I added. So ultimately I ended up having like a 23 average at 17 or at 15 to 16 here on this second red day. I was up a lot. And again, the part of me how I like to trade them is like, I'm going to stay short. I swing these things till back where they came from, whether it takes me 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, like that's how I do it. Unfortunately, when we bounce here, I also end up adding to my short. This is where I probably made the mistake where the amount of shares I added, I don't remember exactly how much, but I just know it added the level of uncertainty to me that if this thing was holding like it is here and we do one more run to say 30 or, 35, 40, you never know how high these can really, really go. I had put on enough size into this bounce now where, I didn't feel comfortable with that happening. And so unfortunately, when it started perking on this green candle, right, when it looked like it was actually going to make a higher high, the same way kind of any of these candles were going to make a higher high and kind of start that next wave, when we did that, I did cover, right? So like at my trades here, I just had the picture of the daily chart. You see that this green candle, you can't even see it because I'm just covering. I throw in the towel, and which is very unlike me, right? Even if I am uncertain or unsure of a pump going higher, I at least downsize to a size that I am okay willing to go against me another 50, 100%, right? I talk about that. I kind of like to pick a price well above where it's at, and I have a small enough size to justify that kind of risk and that kind of price difference if the stock did go against me. So my biggest mistake here, which I still am hating myself for, is that I covered it all. I didn't downsize to my position, the amount of position or the size of my position that I like to swing on. I covered it all. I don't know why. I think I mentally tapped out. I was like, nope, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I just kind of lost sight of the big picture and why I was short in the first place, which ultimately is how I made so much money on the back end once I missed it. So again, if we go to the daily chart, not even 2 days later, right, it dies. Like I was days from being there, right? And I didn't have any short, right? I pretty much missed it the entire time. I did eventually start shorting in like the 14s and 13s, just scalping it. It wasn't anything special. I made a couple grand, and unfortunately, like that, I just started kicking myself because if you know how I play these, I should have been there for this. So to be scalping it around and making a few grand versus have I kept this short position, this would have been a huge win, right? I would have been up 6 figures here, and it would have been nice. And I would have held it easily. I wouldn't even covered. I would have stuck with my plan of that this pump's going to go back to where it came from, and I would have held it all the way down here, being short from easily in the 20s, and be done with it, right? So again, I screwed up that way. We will get to how I ended up making money on this day later towards the end of this video, but that is kind of essentially the first, or really the big screw up I had was covering here, missing this first pull down from 10 to pretty much, $10, or from 20 to $9, $8, $8.50. That definitely had me leave some money on the table there. So if we keep moving along, then we get to my biggest loss of the month, which was 15 grand on the 12th. Again, so this was also MMV. I really, really screwed this one up here again on this big day. So you see the only day it actually had any strength whatsoever, which is on this green candle. This is where I screwed up. So this was the 12th. Let's go on the intraday. the 12th year, I really screwed up, and it really came down to just slippage. It really was that's the only reason it was big. The good part is I didn't like fight. I didn't get stubborn and let this thing just ride against me. The reality is it wasn't paying attention, and by the time I looked back at the chart, unfortunately, it was well past my risk. I'm like, oh crap, and I have to get out. So if we go to the daily or the intraday of my trades, so again, to kind of make you realize what I was thinking is that a lot of times after some of these scams dump, after they have the huge liquidation, right? We just had dumped from $10 all the way down to like 2 or 3. Sometimes a couple days later, they will like put out a PR or they will kind of bring it up pre-market to get some more volume going and then dump it again. Again, not as harsh, not as long, but again, it's like the gap up is brought up just to sell more shares. That's not always the case, but it's been the case that I had seen in the last couple of months when any plays have done this, and I usually miss them because again, I see a gap and I think, oh my gosh, it's actually gonna run instead of dump this time. I'm not gonna short it. Turns out they don't do that and they dump it. So when they were gapping up here, when MMV was gapping up, I thought to myself, okay, if they bring in volume, like they did on the liquidation day, I want to be short. Now, the downside is that they brought some volume in. Or the good side is that it was really bad. It initially was good because that's why it got me short. But it really was bad because the volume died. I didn't really notice it. And then real volume came in. And that actually was a squeeze. So if we go to my trades here, again, I'm actually getting short. Unfortunately, I wasn't patient getting to the spike. I ended up getting near the lows. And again, I just kind of lost track of it. I unfortunately was caught watching too many other things. I think I was chatting with someone in the chat room. And all of a sudden, we break over high day. I don't see it until 4. And then I remember thinking, okay, I tried to not switch my plan, but I'm like, okay, I clearly was just being lazy, not lazy, just unfortunately bad timing. Wasn't even looking at the stock when it broke my risk. Let's risk now this little high, right? I saw it at 4, it hit 420, immediately pulled back down to 380, and I was like, okay, I missed, just being I don't know what the right word is, just I don't know, not lazy, but just being unfortunately not looking. My risk went from 360 to now I'm like, okay, I'll give it one chance at 420. And if it breaks that, I'm out, right? I unfortunately should have covered lower, but again, more like the Tim Grattani, cut losses intelligently approach. I thought to myself, okay, it's already hit 420. We're down at 4. So I'm watching it pull to 380, breaks that new high, I'm out. Otherwise, if I can catch a pullback, I'll get out at the 360 level where I should have, and it'll be a loss that way. And again, if you look at my trades, it didn't, right? It broke out one more time, which is really frustrating, and then it died, and then it pulled back to 360. So what should have been, like a $5,000 loss ended up being, 3 times that, a $15,000 loss. So again, super frustrating. You could argue I should have just covered it 380 when I saw it there. That would have been more like a $9,000 loss versus 15. Either way, the reality is I missed covering when I should have. Just wasn't paying attention and led to slippage either way, wherever I covered it. So either way, it's kind of a shitty trade nonetheless. The best way to look at it is that, I lost 15, but I made 30 on it 2 days later or 3 days earlier. So really net 15K on the ticker of MMV. Unfortunately that second loss though did lead to a very slight red week, because I took a little smaller losses on the 11th and 13th. So yeah, that's what really resulted in my biggest red day or loss of the month. The only loss just over $10,000 at 15K. So it sucks. It happens. But it's not the end of the world, right? 15K is a very manageable loss for me, even after slippage. It's certainly not a loss I like taking normally. Again, if I took only 15K losses, yeah, we'd be talking a much different story. But one is not going to kill me. It was frustrating in the moment, but we moved on. We went from there. So into the third week, on the 18th was clearly my best day. The only trade that I remember that really stuck out to me was the kind of the crypto sector. So if you've been watching Bitcoin, Bitcoin's had a great start to 2023. I think we've been nothing but up. Like the moment January started, it just started having green candle after green candle after green candle. And before you know it, we went from 17K. I think now we're trading around like 23, 24K. And so some of the crypto stocks had also incredible runs. SOS was a great runner back when the crypto sector was hot. And now we've had a great bounce, right? We've gone from the lows of 270 all the way as high as like 850. So I ended up actually taking a small loss on this one. Unfortunately, if you notice, like the volume isn't that great. It's like 1 million shares traded on the highest day or the top day. Really on the illiquid side, I look back at this and wish I just didn't really play it. I kind of ignored that. The reason why I liked it so much because it was the one ticker of all the crypto related stocks that had so many green days in a row. It had the most, certainly was the most extended percent wise. So that kind of caught me in to wanting to trade it, kind of ignoring the liquidity, even though it wasn't great. So I did end up taking a small loss on this. If we go right here, I ended up losing $2,000 on this. So this, I get caught up, I believe, in this fake move, right? The day it set the high, I didn't get squeezed, thankfully, but I quickly recognized it was holding green along with the rest of the crypto sector, right? If we go, let's get rid of MMV, SOS here, right? I get short thinking it's going to go red. Once it comes back along with the rest of crypto, I just cut it. I knew it wasn't something I wanted to stay in, especially being a liquid, right? It could easily hit higher, and that's what happened. So I did lose $2,000 there. Although the next day, I still lost on SOS the next day. The next day, I don't even have the chart of it because it was such a small loss. But I got short, and then I immediately just covered. I'm like, no, what? I hate this liquidity. I don't know why I even came back the next day to short it. I lost like $500. I was like, nope, I'm done. I'm out. Where I did make money was coin, because as you can see, SOS did actually die. So if I stayed short, I would have made money. Where I decided to cover SOS and put my energy on was actually coin. Coin has even had a higher run since I shorted it, but on the 18th is when I shorted it. Because again, similar to SOS, all these crypto-related stocks did have really, really nice runs. So if we go into that intraday, let's see if I can get it here. I'm pretty sure I can. But on this one, I made around $6,000 to $7,000. I originally lost on it, but then made money from it back. If we go to my trades here, here it is. So what happened is that if you've been watching crypto lately, crypto and Bitcoin specifically has been following the markets quite frequently. Not all the time, but in terms of like whenever there's big news out, whenever there's any reports about the economy, they unfortunately start to follow each other. And I'm not really a fan of that. However, I'm not going to deny that it happens. And so when it did happen, PPI came out. For those who don't know what PPI is like, I don't barely know what it is, right? It's kind of a form of like price indexing, a consumer price index. It's one of just essentially, whether I know what it is or not, it is one of the ways kind of the economy is gauged based how we've been looking at it. Everyone's been paying attention about inflation, interest rates, all that good stuff. And so constantly people are watching the indicators of the economy to see kind of where we're at. And so PPI came out, it ended up being a bearish reaction. And so kind of SPY kind of sold off a bit. And so that's what made crypto follow as well as coin. So when I got short here, I was a very quick, immediate loss. I knew I was wrong as it ramped right back to highs. But then I got re-short. And you might think this is actually chasing. And the only reason why I actually shorted coin, and I didn't short Mara, I didn't short Riot. There were so many other crypto stocks that I could have shorted, but I actually picked coin because coin was one of the only ones that was still red on the day. I believe Mara last time when I was looking at it, it was already red like 5% on the day. And here coin is, still up 1% or 2% on the day. So I'm like, you know what? No, I can easily risk the highs here. I can still get short with plans of it going red and covering there. So that's what happened, right? I let it test red on these couple bounces, fail, pull back down, and I covered kind of as it was rounding out, avoided this bounce, although it never really went much higher, right? I kind of was worried it was going to come back green, or at least test green. I was like, I don't need to give that many profits back. You could say I should have reshorted after it failed, and then I would have caught maybe this late day fade, but I was happy with it. Again, I made over $6,000 even after taking this loss, which I believe I lost like $2,000 or $3,000. So I really made like $9,000 on this. So again, I'm happy with that trade. I like how I traded that. It would have been nice if I just stayed short in SOS. But again, like I said, I covered for the reason of liquidity. So it really wouldn't have changed that whether it went up or down. It's kind of just how I felt about it when I entered it. So yeah, that's that. As we enter the last full week of January, clearly you can see the 23rd was a significant portion of my month. Now, the reason why now 23rd was a significant portion of my month, but it also was the reason for a significant portion of these borrow fees, right? I paid a lot of overnight interest on VENG and BBBY, VENG and Bed Bath & Beyond, BBBY. I say that 5 times fast. A lot of overnight interest. The 27th was a good day too, which I'll talk about after. But essentially, Bed Bath & Beyond was the first big one. I made my biggest trade on it, individual trade, was around over 73 grand. Although I made a little bit extra money, I believe, in a couple of the swing accounts that I have short. I'm not going to go into detail of Bed Bath & Beyond solely because I made an actually more in-depth detail video that's going to come out on the Clover Trading IO YouTube's page. I believe it's going to come out sometime in March, so it's going to be some time. So if you're patient, you'll get to see it. Otherwise, or in that video, you'll get to see my actual trades on that one. For now, I'll just talk about it briefly. Like, for those who've been watching BBBY, like this thing's essentially going bankrupt, right? They're almost positive to be going bankrupt. Any day now, they're probably going to announce their bankruptcy. Again, I know it's a former runner. It's been a huge, great run from 5 to 30. It had another great run here, just pretty much squeezing shorts who thought they would go bankrupt here. And just kind of the short squeeze kind of caught fire and immediately went then from, 150 all the way up to nearly 6. Typical first red day, a great first red day, given the fact that it's never gone red the entire run up. Awesome range from the 520s all the way down to 370. I did end up holding this overnight, did end up kind of riding through this bounce, then having to cover and reshort on this day. And then by the end of the time, I had ended up covering it right near $3. Did actually avoid this bounce. I didn't really expect it to gap up the next day. I actually thought I was missing out on profits. I thought I was going to have to see this thing, in the 250s the next day. Ended up avoiding it, but again, made 70 grand that day. And again, covered it on the 23rd, which is also the same day I got, lucky with VENG. So what happened with VENG? After I missed it on this day, and I kind of remembered like why I should have been short and never should have covered in the 20s up here. To me, it was like, you know what? I may have a way worse price, but my trade plan doesn't change at all, like at all. Right, I should be short from here. So it's like removing the fact of where I'm even short from, of average wise, as long as I have a good risk intact of thinking that it's never gonna, first of all, starting in and risking the 20s, right, risking these highs now that we know it held last time, but then 2, adding once I know there's a bounce high to risk off of, was the plan. So once we started bouncing and then holding this mid 13s, I did actually start getting quite aggressive in shorting these last 3 red days. And then we get a huge gap down. And the reason for this gap down was because of the CE, was because OTC Markets gave it the caveat emptor, which stands for buyer beware. Again, if you don't know what that is, I'm going to reference back to my first YouTube video. Watch it. I go over what that is. And essentially what the CE is, it crushes stocks. It's probably one of the worst ratings in OTC you can get. If you get it, it's not foolproof, but it's very high odds that the stock is then pretty much guaranteed to go back to where it came from, if not pennies on the dollar. And so that's what happened, right? The very next day, we gapped down. We panicked super hard from, the 6s with a $7 high all the way down to $1. I covered $1, again, on the 23rd, and that was that. Again, I put in about 170, 200 grand in there on this talk, risking this 13 highs. I ended up having like 11 to 12 average. So I was risking again, because I know how a deal this is. I was risking again 10 to 15 grand if we had broken over these highs. Got lucky with the CE, which is honestly partly the reason why I always why I always personally like to have something on short. Like I said, like I had a little bit short here, even though I was willing for it to go against me. Like I said, I should have not covered everything and kept a very small piece on, for the reason of that some of these never get the CE, but some that do, it's like I benefit from that. And again, I'm not having a large size. I only had large size here because I wanted to risk off the highs. But here, that's why I say earlier in the video, like I'm pissed that I covered it all, because I should have gone down to such a small portion that I could have easily risked, 30, 35 and been fine. It wouldn't even been like a 10 grand loss, right? And so that's what I did. I just moved my risk down to 10 grand being here, and I got lucky, right? I timed the CE right. There's no way to do that other than randomness. But again, the whole reason why I'm short in the first place, to close out this, tangent, is because the CE can happen whenever. That's the danger of even longing these. That's why I really hate longing any of these pumps, because it's very easy to say, well, why didn't you buy it at $3 and sell it at 20? Like, why don't you make 10 extra money? And it's like, because this thing can get halted any moment. This thing can get the CE any moment. It's just a huge risk of doing that, so I don't like doing that, and it paid off for me to be short. So if you look at my trades here, I actually do try to add this. Even though you see this arrow here, I fill like 200 shares. I really don't feel anything substantial to what the size I had. Covered it all, again, in the ones, made over 150 grand. So that's why you see the 23rd being such a big day. The only other two trades that I really remember were on the 27th. 27th was of LCID. I'm sure if you were watching the stock market that day, you had saw LCID go absolute bananas. Kind of the whole EVs caught fire because Tesla had such a huge bounce here. Like Tesla, was once at 100 beginning of January and is now pushing 200. But at the time, it had this day pushing, 180. And Lucid pretty much caught fire in terms of a short squeeze, right? It just caught a lot of shorts off guard, and this thing went nuts. And so I actually was able to record this trade live, and I showed the 4-leaf clover subscribers this trade live in a webinar. I got really good feedback by that. I might be doing some live trades for them in the future. Maybe even put enough live trades together to kind of put like a little guide. It's very rough. Do not do not quote me on that I'm coming out with anything, because it's a lot of work, and I commend people like Ratani who made it, because it's tough. So I just happened to have been recording this day and got this on file, and the 4-leaf clovers got to see it. But essentially, this was the trade I took. So huge parabolic. For those who know how I like to trade parabolics, I really love being there for when they start halting numerous times in a row. And I don't mean halting once and then trading for 10 minutes and halting again. I mean like halt, right? No hesitations in between. And that's kind of that is what we started doing, right? We started halting once. We started halted twice. I got started short on the second halt. We halted a third time. I got short on the third halt. We halted the fourth time. I did hold off from adding here because I knew if this goes any higher, I will be kind of out of my risk level, right? I was willing to see how it would go to 20. That was kind of the number I had in mind where it should fail or could fail. And by the two starters I took, by the time I got to 20 was at my risk level and at my risk tolerance. So I said, no, I'm not going to try to add unless I have a better or lower risk level in mind. So once we actually gapped down to 15 and now 18 is the risk level, I actually covered this out the open. It opened at 15. I covered that. It tried halting up like 2 or 3 times at 16. And by the third time, when it couldn't halt up again, I reshorted the ad that I just covered. And then it halted down to the 13s, covered the rest there. Ended up actually going long at the 12s, the low 12s, selling that over 13 here. Ultimately ended up making like 8,500 on it. Again, the 4-leaf clovers got to see that. I talked it pretty much over like 30 minutes. We talked about it versus these 3 minutes I'm talking to you guys about it. But yeah, kind of a very crazy parabolic short. I took smaller size because I just was kind of scared. It was for those who were watching it, how scary it looked and was. Glad to have made 8,500. That was a good trade, great trade to experience, being such an intense parabolic. And yeah, other than that, the last day of the month, I believe on the 31st, I then did short Tesla the next day, right? Because when all stocks like to run together, especially when LCID makes this kind of move and Tesla then makes the move to like 180, I like that kind of sector momentum, even though it's very short-lived for EV stocks this week, or last week, I should say. I can see this week. It is still this week, technically. I like to see that because then I know it's like kind of like the beginning of the end. It's kind of the short squeeze or the euphoria, whatever you want to call it, that I like to see then a pullback come from that. So I actually did make money on this red day. Frankly, it didn't die because of the momentum shift that I thought it would. It actually died because I think there was some uncertainty around the markets going into the FOMC meeting with the Fed and Jerome Powell. And so people didn't really want to hold their stocks into that meeting. And so the SPY, along with Tesla, sold off. So if we look at like my trades again, Tesla here, right? I missed this first initial pull, but short of this bounce, risked the highs of like 180. It never even got back over green convincingly. We then fade. I cover some here, reshort the bounce as we get close to VWAP, reshort some more as we fail the bounce, cover some more there. End up holding the majority of my position overnight, which you then see the next day. We have a strong green day if you remember the daily chart look. And unfortunately, I did not cover this dip. I was very close. I wanted to cover it like 162. The low was like 162.70, so it was just 70 cents away from getting my cover. Ended up covering some when we held green, covering the rest when we made a new high, and that was that. Made like, what was it, like $10 grand. So that was cool. I usually don't make money on Tesla. I actually generally lose money on Tesla, and so that's nice to see. Unfortunately, I actually, if you look at my month is gone for February so far, which I'll talk in detail. This day was because of Tesla, right? I kind of got too ahead of myself making money on it earlier in the week, that by the end of the week, I thought I knew what I was doing. Clearly, you can see here, not all these losses, this whole day isn't only Tesla, but it's most of Tesla. And I actually made the same mistake, where was it, last year? I think it was in March. I think it was the 24th here, right? Or maybe the 31st. One of these 2 weeks, I ended up just getting too caught up and trying to trade Tesla. I don't know why I have a fixation on them. But it is what it is. I made the same mistake this year, so I'm probably done trading them, right? It's, again, not detrimental losses, but it's just unnecessary losses. So it's like, even though it's great that I made 10 grand shorting on this day, it kind of opened the door back up to what I did last year, which was think that I can trade it when I clearly can't. And again, I'll go into more detail in those trades once February is over. But anyways, yeah, that's that. Like I said, I kind of didn't finish my thought process there, but on VENG and BBBY, because I was swinging them for a few days to a week or two, a portion of these borrow fees were actually those interests. Or me paying those interests. So even after that, paying 25 grand, still came out to 280, incredible month. Couldn't be happier to start my year like that. It just goes to show how tough last year was, right? If you watch my last month's recap video where I talk about my whole entire year as a whole, right? I finished after borrow fees. I finished up 277. So to literally make 280 on the first month of the year, which is like over half what I netted last year. Couldn't be happier how they're starting. Now, granted, there's 11 months left in the year. I could easily be an idiot and give it all back, right? Trading is not guaranteed in that sense. So I do need to still trade safe, but it is a good feeling to have that kind of ratio where you make half of your last year in the first month of this year. So anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Comment what you've learned. Comment if what you'd like to see more of. I know I kind of only do these YouTube videos or these kind of recaps for my YouTube channel. A lot of other videos that are other different topics I've been doing with Clover Trading on their YouTube channel, so check them out. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. I will catch you guys next month when February's over. See ya.